Welcome back to Views on News. We are discussing the deteriorating situation of the human rights in the so-called largest democracy, India. And for discussion on this, we are joined in the studio by Mr. Ramesh Singh Arora and Mr. Javed Siddique. On the phone line, we have another participant, Mr. Ahmed Bilal Sufi, is expert in international law and the former federal law minister. Mr. Sufi, thank you very much for your time, for being on Views on News. We really appreciate that. Now, this Khalistan movement, owing to the high-handedness and the rise of Hindutva ideology in India, it is gaining traction worldwide. Referendums have been held. This campaign is being launched, and the Sikh community says that it is in line with the principles set in the UN Charter and also the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the subsequent relevant covenants. Specifically, they want to exercise the right to self-determination. What does international law specifically says about any community that feels threatened because of the high-handedness of the authorities to exercise the right to self-determination?
Well, thank you very much. Basically, the right of self-determination entitles any community to determine its own fate under international law and domestic law, which means if they feel there is act of repression against them, or for any reason their rights are not being guaranteed as promised, they do have the right to launch a political movement in order to assert their collective right of self-determination, which could take the shape of autonomy, more powers under the Constitution, or any other mode that those who are aspiring are seeking. Now, we clearly notice that the Sikh community in India is extremely disappointed with the promises made by the Union of India and its successive governments, particularly the present government, which has demonstrated serious high-handedness against not only Sikhs but other communities as well, particularly Muslims and Christians. The Sikh community has for now several decades been raising the issue of Khalistan and independent state for quite some time, and it has been their consistent practice over a period of several decades. There have been ups and downs in this movement, but it has been a demand which now recently, in the last 1 or 2 years, has taken traction, has become very vocal, has become very pronounced, and the reason seems to be that the Hindutva ideology, which is basically an ideology which says only one nation has the right to rule India, which are the Hindu nation, has clearly developed alienation for other communities. Sikhs in said momentum find a very clear legal basis to argue that they should be given independence, and this is something that they are presenting. Not only that, they are pushing this movement, they have also demonstrated by specific acts of various referendums abroad, which may be taken initially as symbolic, but truly they have become very powerful referendums in terms of expression, because the numbers participating has been staggering. And it has startled people because in lakhs, these referendums which have been taking place in Europe and in Canada have absolutely surprised everyone. So this is very clear expression, a political expression, a legal entitlement that they have. They only have to now look at the legal basis for the territory of the Union of India if there is a dispute that was initially objected to by the Sikh community at the time of partition. The Sikh legal community already is working.
Right. Mr. Sufi, your point is well taken. So regarding the United Nations or any of its major organs, does it have the mandate to implement that principle of right to self-determination if a certain community like Sikhs in this case, when they feel threatened?
Well, actually, there is not a very distinct forum for this. And we notice that in case of Kashmiris and Palestinians. But in the case of Sikhs, we clearly see that the level of voice that they have raised and the way they have pronounced their movement, and they have asserted and become their visibility in Europe, which is now the capital of European Union, and where all these states that have been sponsoring international conventions relating to human rights and self-determination, they are noticing all these developments. This is an extraordinary movement in true sense. So I believe it is voluntary, it is self-propelled, it is induced, and it is something that is becoming a voice, and it is developing such a strong traction that it cannot be ignored. The important capitals which eventually contribute to United Nations structure are individually noticing this. And I think that is the right way of what the Sikh community is doing.
So what I understand from this is there is no proper mechanism at the United Nations level in place in order to give a certain community or to exercise that particular authority over any country to make that country, to let a certain community to exercise its right to self-determination.
Well, that's my understanding, and that there is no absolute forum which gives a declaration of self-determination. That is something that the community or the group which is aspiring for self-determination has to struggle for, and it is the right way of struggling. They have adopted a correct strategy, in my view, because their visibility and their pressures is being felt in those capitals. That will translate into a policy towards India by these countries, where they will insist on India over a period of time, sometimes in the near future, that either you give the rights, or do you satisfy them, or listen carefully to their demands. Because India is also feeling pressure otherwise as well. There are about 7 states, a huge country. It's a very, very diverse country with hundreds of languages, hundreds of different kinds of smaller nations and caste and creed. And its ability to retain itself, its geographical unity, is always a question mark. And it's just a matter of time, some analysts assess, that you will find that internal diversity becoming a basis for gradual division of India, considering the repressive policy. Had there been Congress in power, the possibility of weakening the Union of India would have been far less. But with the current policies, whereby they are suppressing, they are actually encouraging Hindus to go after minorities, that is sending an extremely bad message to all the minorities, and Sikhs are sensing it, and therefore we see a self-determination movement which is developing in a far aggressive fashion than one could imagine.
Right, Mr. Sufi. So what options, legal options at the international level are left with the Sikh community if there is no proper explicit mechanism defined by the United Nations for the brutalities and the discrimination which being committed by Indian authorities over the Sikh community? Can they knock the doors of International Criminal Court or International Court of Justice, for that matter?
They may not be able to right now go to International Court of Justice based on the preliminary facts that I am familiar with, but I think they have a lot of legal minds, young Sikh lawyers who are writing on this issue. And if you scan journal articles, you will notice that some writings have emerged which kind of develop a legal argument for a separate Sikh state, and also for creating or carving out their legal framework within the Union of India and the Constitution of India. So we have to see how do they gradually develop that momentum, and also whether the legal community at an international level also aligns itself to the nature of the arguments. But the most powerful argument is essentially the political argument, and that is this series of referendums that we have noticed, which has been conducted. A visible presence, a well asserted presence in Europe, in America, in North America, in Canada, US, etc. And I believe these are the countries where eventually decision making is being done, and the pressure is beginning to be felt by the Modi government already.